Hey, y'all. Welcome back to episode 20 of the Late Night Vision Show. I am Hans, and, man, we have a treat for y'all today. But before we get to our interview, we've got a man who didn't think we were probably going to make it to episode 20, Jason Robertson. How you doing, bud?
Let me tell you something, Hans. I'm great, but he's exactly right. I didn't think we'd ever get to 20, and when we started this, I said, I'll be shocked if we make it to episode 3. So I'm very surprised to be here. And one more thing that is true is we would not be at episode 20 without Hans prodding me every single week, saying, what are we going to talk about this week on the podcast? Because I'm sure I would have given up a long time ago. But no, we're glad to be here.
And your personality is you like to get things done early and nice and neat and done. And I'm like calling you, a few hours in advance and being like, hey, okay, well, we'll just talk about this, or So we have different ways of doing it.
The podcast is released every Thursday morning early. It is uploaded around midnight. I do that. And I'm not going to talk about the number of times at 11:30 on Wednesday night that I'm waiting for Hans to send over the final file. But whatever. No, I mean, don't mean to call you out or anything, but
yeah. I'm out hunting, man. Out hunting, trying to get these hogs. But hey, this week we're going to be talking about suppressors and the process in which to set up a trust. And we've got Jim Willi from the Willi Law Firm here as a guest that we're going to have on the show. He's going to go through the whole process of getting all that set up. So y'all stay tuned with us after the break and listen to Jim Willi.
Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Late Night Vision Show. And as promised, we have got Jim Willi here. Jim is from the Willi Law Firm in Austin, Texas, and myguntrust.com.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, this is Hans, man. We're glad to have you on the show, and thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, Jim is actually, he has done work in full disclosure for both Hans and I. He did gun trust for both of us. We both had an excellent experience, and he is the most knowledgeable person that I've ever come across in this industry of gun trust. And Hans and I said, you know what, let's get him on the show and ask him all these questions that everybody wants the answer to.
Sounds good.
Well, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and just jump right in. And I'm just going to go ahead and we've got a list of questions, and we're going to try to bust through them, and you just give us all the answers that I know you get asked these questions every day. So just one thing, I want to lay out for the people that are listening. I know some guys are like, gun trust, what is that? And I just want to briefly say that so people know, when you buy a suppressor or another NFA-regulated item, like something that's fully automatic, you can't just go down to the gun store and buy that and take it home that day. You have to go through an approval process through the ATF, and each one of those items has a serial number on it. And there is a federal tax stamp that goes with that serial numbered item. And I'm probably saying all this wrong, and Jim can correct me when I'm done. But so you have to go through this whole process. And there's a couple different ways of doing it. There may be more than 2 ways, but the common ways is just walking in there as an individual, filling out all the paperwork, sending it to the ATF, and waiting to get it back. And that tax stamp is issued in your personal name. The other way is what we're really going to be talking about today is instead of buying that item and getting that tax stamp in an individual's name, you get it actually in a gun trust, in an NFA gun trust. And that's where Jim's area of expertise is. And so, Jim, did I explain that sort of right for the people that may not even know what a gun trust is?
Well, yeah, generally, yes.
Okay,
basically, So basically what's happening is when you go to a dealer and you want to buy an NFA firearm, like a silencer, short barrel rifle, short barreled shotgun, or even a fully automatic weapon, you walk in the store and say, I want to buy that one right there. And the dealer goes, great. And he takes your money just like every other gun you've ever bought from a dealer in your life. And then he has to prepare something called an ATF Form 4 application. And so what he's doing is he's requesting permission to be allowed to transfer that one specific make, model, serial number of NFA firearm from the dealer to the buyer. And then the application goes off in the mail. And so there's a $200 tax payment in the application. So every time an NFA firearm changes owners, the government has its hands out asking for $200.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing that since 1934 when that was half the cost of a Model A.
Wow.
And so they set it super high like that so they could prevent the common man from being allowed to own stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extremely effective, and that's why we all probably did not inherit stuff like that from our grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So,
so then with that said, does, let's talk about it. You've kind of explained there the trust, but so let's jump into that. Does everyone who buys a suppressor, we're going to talk suppressors because that's what most of our listeners are thinking about for hog and coyote hunting. So does everyone who buys a suppressor, do they need to get a trust?
They do not. You can buy NFA firearms two different ways. You can buy them as an individual or you can buy them as an entity. So when I bought my first two silencers, I didn't know what I was doing, so I bought them in my own name. And the dealer didn't tell me there was any other way to do it. He was just trying to sell me a silencer. And so when I got it home, here I am at home with the tax stamp and the silencer, and it's got my name on the tax stamp. And that's when it dawned on me for the first time that I'm the only person in the world that could ever legally be in possession of that silencer for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I explained that to my wife that, hey, I've got these two silencers here and I've got to keep them locked up where you have no access to them whatsoever for the rest of my life. Otherwise, you're committing a felony.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife was not real happy about that. My lawyer wife doesn't like to go around committing felonies every day.
And she would have access to that just by having the code to your safe and you left the house, correct? That's possession.
That's right. That's right. Just having the combination gun safe means she's got access. So she's the one that put me on this project to see if there was some other way to acquire NFA firearms so that more than one person can legally be in possession. And so then I started looking into it, and there we are on this Form 4 application. It says you can buy it in the name of an entity, like a LLC or a corporation or a partnership or a trust. And, I can set up LLCs all day long, so that there's nothing to it. But the problem with that is that you've got these annual income tax returns and public information reports and everything else that goes along with that you have to file every year. But then there was this other thing called a trust. And a trust is kind of like a will. It's just a written document. Once it's signed and notarized, it just sits there and nobody even knows it exists, except you and anybody else you want to know that exists. But the cool thing about a trust is that anybody who's a trustee of the trust can use it and possess it just like they own it. So that solved my problem because I was able to make my wife a trustee, my brother who lives a few miles away trustee, so that he can borrow my stuff anytime he wants to. And then once my boys became 18, I could make them trustees too. And then it'd be legal for them to go out and take it out whenever they want to. So that solved my problem. And so I became a big fan. And plus, the other thing about the trust is that the inheritance plan is already built into the trust. So it basically just says that, someday in the future when I eventually die, the beneficiary is the ones entitled to inherit whatever property happens being that trust. And so normally, if you were setting up a will, you're married and with kids, it'd be your wife is the primary beneficiary and your children are the secondary beneficiaries. Same way the rest of your state's already set up. That's the way the trust is normally set up.
So then what would happen if, I don't mean to interrupt you there, but what would happen
No, go ahead.
if as an individual, you had that just like you did and you passed away? What happens at that point to that suppressor that your wife can't legally own?
Well, the next step then is to find the will. So, and if they have a will, and the will designates who the executor of the will is, and it designates who the beneficiaries. But at that moment, the executor of the will is the only person in the world that can legally be in possession of that silencer until it's legally transferred out of the estate of the deceased person. So how do you get authority to act as an executor? You have to hire an attorney, and then you have to go down and pay money, probate the will. And so sometime after that, weeks later, then the executor is able to get something called letters testamentary, where the judge has granted him the authority to start acting as the executor. Now the executor can legally take possession of the silencer. And then until they process the correct paperwork with the ATF, then the executor is the one who's the only person in the world legally allowed to be in possession. And so if it was going to you have to look at the will at that point and see who the legal beneficiary in the will is of that NFA firearm, then file all the paperwork with the ATF to get it. Same kind of application, except this one's called a Form 5, but it's the same basic idea, asking for permission to be allowed to transfer it from the estate of the deceased to the beneficiary in the will. So you have to provide all this extra documentation, like copy of the will, copy of the death certificate, copy of the letters testamentary from the court, and all that stuff, just to be able to finally transfer it to the beneficiary.
Hey, Jim, real quick, this is Hans. Hey, I've got a question too, kind of leading into that. Really, how many NFA items can you add to a trust, and are there any trusts out there that only allow for one item?
My trust, you can have as many as you want. It doesn't matter if it's a NFA firearm or a non-NFA firearm. My entire gun collection is in my one single gun trust, because it doesn't make any sense to me to do it any other way. But there are a lot of trusts out there that only allow for NFA firearms only, and don't allow any kind of non-NFA firearm, like regular pistol, rifle, shotgun, that kind of stuff in the trust. And then there's a few trusts that have come on the scene the last couple years where they only allow one specific make, model, and serial number of silencer in that one trust.
Right.
And that's it. You're not allowed to put anything else in trust. So presumably you have to get a new trust every time you go out and buy another silencer.
Well, that definitely explains, because there are some people that I've heard that have bought a suppressor on a trust, got home later on, went to go buy another suppressor, and was told that they needed to set up another trust, and they were quite dismayed with that situation, because they weren't under that impression whenever they originally purchased that suppressor.
I assume the point of that is
calls all the time.
Yeah, I assume that the point of those single item trusts is so that that person can continue to sell more trust. I mean, is there any other reason?
It sounds like it.
I think that's exactly. They price them very low so that they can coax you into going down that path. But once most people don't ever bother reading any of this, they just take the word of the dealer that it's a great trust, great idea, and they just do it. But it isn't until years later, when they start looking into it, maybe that they start realizing that they've just got a mess on their hands.
Sure.
So, and the thing I don't like about these trusts is that they don't even allow you to specify your beneficiaries. So they just say, when you die, it goes to your heirs. Well, your heirs is a complex legal term that is defined when you die. So you don't even know who that is until you have to die first, and then somebody else can try to go figure that out. Heirs means, it can get very complicated, especially if you've got blended marriages, because heirs isn't just one person necessarily. Sure. And then how do you split a silencer? So those single item trusts, they essentially say, when I die, the people allowed to inherit one single silencer are these 15 people. So now you've just got a gigantic mess, and everybody's been out of shape because you can't. It's just going to be a mess someday. When that's just a time bomb waiting to happen, in my opinion.
Well, Jim, we've got some more questions here. All this has
okay.
been super. I mean, you've really explained this well, and so we've just got kind of a list here of random questions, bullet point questions that I know that we get, and so I know you get them every single day. But some of these are probably myths, some of them are probably truth. But I want to know, this is one that I've always heard. This was what everybody always said. This is why I'm not getting a suppressor ever, and that is because, and tell me if this is true or false, at any time, unannounced, day or night, 365 days of the year, the ATF can knock on my door, come into my house with no search warrant, and they can demand to come see that suppressor and the tax stamp, and they can legally enter my house. Is that true or false?
That's completely false. It's ridiculous.
That's not near as exciting as I was hoping, but okay, good. That's a good answer.
So, and one of the most recent posts on my website addresses that issue head on. It's, the Fourth Amendment applies. You don't give up your Fourth Amendment rights to for a search and seizure just because you buy a silencer.
Great. So what can the ATF legally do? Could they demand, maybe not come in your house, but could they come and say, hey, we would like to inspect this NFA item as well as your stamp?
They have the authority to knock on your door and ask to see the stamp.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have some reason to believe that is that you're in possession of some kind of illegal silencer, they can knock on your door and politely ask you to see the original stamp, and then you can say, I'll go get it in a second, and close the door and leave them out on the porch. And then you can go get it, and you can show it to them, and then tell them you'll have a nice day, and they leave. If they wanted to enter your house, they'd have to get a search warrant.
Okay. Well, let me run another one by you, another scenario, because I've got buddies. We're always running around to different properties hunting. Everybody's got suppressors. Do you have to carry a copy of your tax stamp with the suppressor at all times when you're running around doing whatever?
I recommend you carry a paper copy of the tax stamp when you're out and about with your silencers. This is sort of a holdover from the law the way it used to be prior to, I think, September 2015. The law used to be written so that you were presumed to be in possession of an illegal silencer until you proved otherwise. So guilty until proven innocent. So I was telling everybody, always carry all the documentation with you to prove that you're legally in possession. So that'd be a copy of the tax stamp, because that shows this make, model, and serial number of silencers owned by the trust, and then a copy of the trust so that proves you're a trustee of the trust, and then then your driver's license so you can prove that person listed in the trust is actually you. That's what I used to say, because the burden of proof was on you, But I was actually part of an effort to have the law changed so that the state was the one with the burden of proof on that. And so I have a picture on my website my wife took of me testifying at the Senate subcommittee hearing, Texas, Senate, to that committee that was we were trying to get them to change that presumption around. So I believe it was September 2015 they changed it, so now you're innocent until proven guilty. But I still tell everybody, carry a copy of your tax stamp at a minimum, because if somebody ever stopped you and asked, hey, do you have your paperwork on you? Why not just show it to them and let them go? But nobody's ever asked for anything other than copies of my tax stamps. They've never asked me for a copy of my trust or any of that stuff. But occasionally I used to get asked for copies of tax stamps.
So then let's ask another question. This is one thing that I know people that have never, jumped into this process, maybe haven't even read much about it. I know when people ask me, sometimes they're surprised when they don't understand that they can't just, go down to the local gun shop, buy the thing, and either, get the normal approval or wait a day or two and go home with it. But the wait times can be, very long, maybe, and I know it depends on how busy the ATF is and whatever. It can be up to a year, 6 months, whatever. But why is it that some people, and you may not know the answer, but we just got to ask. So why some people, maybe Hans and I submit a request to the ATF for a tax stamp. Both do it today. We both got a trust, all things being equal, and his takes 6 months and mine takes 10 months. Why is there this varying wait time? Is that just the way the government works?
That's kind of unusual because they're, when the applications go off in the mail, and they usually go to an examiner, and then they're sitting in a pile on his desk, and they eventually percolate their way up to the top, and he issues them in the order received in general. But since they started doing these background checks, the ATF actually contracts with the FBI and pays the FBI to run background checks on every one of the trustees. And the term that the ATF uses is responsible persons, but that means trustees with my trust. So they have to do a background check, and so sometimes there may be a delay because they're still waiting on. For some reason, something's not clear. They they want to see what the actual disposition of a case was, that somebody may have been arrested for this or that. And so sometimes they get hung up because they can't figure out what the disposition of a case might have been that might have been a felony. And
gotcha.
So it really depends on the individual and what their criminal history is.
I've got an application there on somebody's desk. I hope that thing gets fished up to the top here pretty soon. But you hear about people that, they're like, oh, I got mine back in 7 months. And then talk to another guy and it's, well, I didn't get mine back for 12 months. And I'm sitting here with twiddling my thumbs thinking, okay, well, am I going to be a lucky one or an unlucky one? But it kind of sounds like it's luck of the draw kind of, as far as what it's going to be. But I hope that thing comes back quick.
There's like yesterday, my son picked up his first silencer from Capitol Armory in Austin, and it was filed October 2017, and it came back September 11th, 2018. So that was 11 months, and we called a few weeks ago just to find out where it was, and the person that at the ATF said that it was still being processed by the FBI. So the holdup these days appears to be the FBI.
So let me ask this, and this is a question that I just get on this exact same subject. I get all the time is why does it take so long? I understand that, there's a lot of legwork going in here, but I can go buy a firearm today. They can make a phone call. They can run this thing. They can find out everything about me in a matter of minutes. And we're paying $200. So it's not like they're having to pay somebody, and the government's not getting any tax off of it. They're $200 a piece. It seems like they should have a room full of people doing nothing but these things. Why does it take 8, 10, 9 months, a year or longer? Is it just literally under manpower and they won't put more people on it, or what is it?
It might be. I've kind of wondered that myself, but I do know that the $200 goes to the ATF, and then they're paying $10 per background check to the FBI. That's the number I heard. So the FBI is only making $10 off this thing, and the ATF guys, they're getting rich. So I don't believe they're as motivated as the ATF. They want to make as much money as they can, but the FBI, they're not as motivated, and they don't have a deadline. They can sit on it, and there's nothing that says they ever have to provide an answer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think that, I mean, I hear this sometimes, and I mean, maybe we just, like to sit out here, especially more conservative leaning people, and we sit around and we say, well, yeah, but they just don't really want us to have them, and so they're intentionally dragging this out because they don't care. You think there's any truth to that, or you think this is just the way, just another example of government wheels turning slow, or do you think it really is they just assume we wouldn't have them and no reason to speed it up?
I think that the ATF wants to speed it up. And most of the people that I've had any contact with, the FBI, they're always actually surprisingly nice people. And a lot of them are gun enthusiasts, and they're just working for the government in this department. They will actually care about what they're doing.
Good.
And so they want to get better at it and serve the industry. I don't think there's, your rank and file person at the ATF, they're gun guys.
Sure.
But occasionally you'll have political appointees that have a different agenda. They're, when Obama was president, he pushed an executive order where they started requiring fingerprints and photographs and background checks of all trustees every time they buy an NFA firearm. So that complicated the hell out of the process and slowed it down considerably. And the ATF is overwhelmed.
Right. Well, so we've gone through
for it.
Right. Exactly. So you did a good job of talking about the trust versus the individual. Now, for those that are sitting at home and saying, man, I may have screwed up. I set this up and bought the suppressor as an individual. How hard is it to move something like that into a trust and set that up?
Well, when I had those first two silencers, I paid $200 each to transfer them from the dealer to me. Once I set up my gun trust, I had to prepare 2 Form 4 applications and pay $400 to transfer those 2 silencers from me to my trust. And so I mailed the Form 4 applications off, waited, the 6 months or so until it was approved. The ATF sends the approval document that everybody calls the tax stamp back to the seller. So in this case, me at the house. Then when I got those 2 tax stamps in the mail, that was my permission to transfer. So then they are now in the trust. And then it opened up my ability to let my wife and any other trustee have possession just like me. So they'd have to pay $200 per NFA firearm to transfer from them to their trust.
So, okay, this has all been eye-opening. Like I said, I've got a trust you've done. I've got Suppressor, got another one on the way, but I've learned a whole bunch today. But so let's say somebody's sitting out there right now and they're like, hey, I don't have a Suppressor, but I'm ready to pull this trigger. I understand now what a trust is, but at the same time, I know I can go down to the gun shop or I can go online and pay, whatever, something dirt cheap, $100, $99, and I can just print this thing off and I can get it and I'm good to go. But tell the listener why should someone buy a trust through an attorney like yourself that does this all day, every day? What is the benefit of dealing with you versus some run-of-the-mill, one-size-fits-all trust that, you can buy online for a nickel?
Well, the trust that I sell is much more comprehensive. My law firm sells much more comprehensive than anything out there that's a gun store gun trust. My trust is usually about 20 pages long, and it's got all sorts of provisions in there that nobody'd ever even thought about doing with the gun store trust. Plus, when I'm on the phone with them and I'm talking to them and I'm explaining how every bit of this stuff works. And I usually spend at least 30 minutes on the phone on the front end explaining how everything works to my clients before we even start working on putting their trust together. And then when I I usually prepare the documents same day we talk, and I email them out to my clients, and I'm, in my email message has my office number and my cell phone number. So if they're ever not sure what they're doing or can't remember what we talked about, or they're just kind of stuck, don't know the answer, they can call me. It's not that big of a deal. But you can't do that at a gun store. They won't even tell you who wrote the trust. They're not going to explain how to set it up properly or the best way. And so they're all just taking a stab in the dark. Most of the gun store trusts that I see come across that I have to rewrite, they never got set up correctly in the first place, or they don't make sense where they're putting people, and because they don't understand what each position means. So, but you do have a significant group of people that do not want to speak to an attorney, don't want advice of an attorney, want to go do all the research themselves. If they want to do that, their time isn't worth that much money, then more power to them.
Well, I want to say this for the people listening out here that, again, as I already mentioned, Hans and I both have used you, and this is the easiest process that you can dream of dealing with Jim. He answers all. If you've got these questions, he'll answer them for you right there on the phone. He gives you all kinds of advice and is very, very helpful in explaining it all. When you go through this process, it's not hard. I know one of the things that he prides himself on is, generally speaking, being able to get these things turned around in one day. It's not something like, a lot of times we think of dealing with an attorney and it's like, well, we got to go down there and set up a consultation and, come back 3 times. Jim pumps these things out and a lot of times he can, like I said, do it within the same day. And, I just want to say, you make this super easy. You do it all day. You ask your list of questions and then, you prepare the right trust for the individual. So you do a great job.
Right. And Jason, I'd like to say something to Jim's credit too. Jim is probably one of the most accessible people that I've met, because I had to call him a couple times on something that I screwed up on my side. But I've got a lawyer in my family, and he won't return my phone calls for like 2 or 3 days. And Jim basically picks up the phone every time I call. So, man, I tell you, to your credit, you do make yourself available.
I try. I love what I do. I've practiced law in a whole bunch of different areas. I've been a lawyer since '96, so 22 years, and I have never had so much fun as working in the gun trust area, because I get to talk to people from every point on the economic spectrum, from people that I would never have ever had any access to back to normal everyday people, and everybody has the same concerns, and everybody gets the same trust. Doesn't matter how wealthy they are. It only made sense to me to do one great job for everybody, and so it's been a blast. And I've been able to help people get into this area, and I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, Jim, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody the best place to find you? If that's your whatever you want to give, phone number, website, if it's social media, give them all the places that you'd like for them to find you at.
Initially, I think the best way to do it is to just go to my website and go to myguntrust.com and dive in, because I've got as much material there as you want to look at. You can read everything you want, but at the end of the day, when you're ready to have me set up your trust, you either email me on the contact form or pick up the phone and call me, and we get going on it. And I usually just need to talk to them for about, I always start by 10 to 15 minutes, but it usually goes on to about 30. I usually, I spend all that time trying to figure out the best way to set up for that person. And then once we nail everything down, then I take all the information over the phone. And that's just going to be full names, first, middle, and last of anybody we identify. And then I take their debit or credit card over the phone. I prepare the documents. I email them out same day. Doesn't matter how late I've got to work. And then when they get the documents from me, they have to, I'll want them to print out 2 of the documents that are attached to the email, go get them signed and notarized. Now the trust is alive. And then I have them scan them and email them back to me just so I can make sure it's done correctly. And then I email them back and say, okay, they look great. You're ready to go to the dealer. And then the dealer needs a copy of one of those 2 documents, the trust, and print out a copy, go to the dealer, and you're ready to buy your first silencer. Simple.
That is great. Well, Jim, I tell you, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. I know that you've answered a lot of questions that Hans and I had, a lot of questions that I know you get asked and our listeners have asked us. And so we just really thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed it. I love doing what I do. Thanks for letting me be a part of your podcast.
Absolutely.
Well, Jim, again, we appreciate it. All the information that you provided for us. Again, like Jason said, go visit them at myguntrust.com. And everybody, y'all stay with us after the break. We'll close out the show, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
All right. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. We really just want to say thank you again to Jim Willi for spending the time with us, taking that, hour out of his busy day working on those gun trusts to sit down with Hans and I here on the Late Night Vision Show. And I hope that he answered a lot of your questions. I know that he answered a lot of ours. And if you've got more questions, seriously, it's a personal recommendation from both Hans and I. Reach out to Jim. You can find him, as he said, at myguntrust.com. And there's a lot of great info over there, a lot of frequently asked questions. But then, once you're ready, if you're ready to dive into this thing, you can contact him right through there, and he will get back to you very quickly with an email. So, again, thanks to Jim for coming on the show.
Yeah. And you know what, Jason, you know what I learned? I learned one thing very important.
What is that?
Well, I learned that Jason Robertson doesn't have to sit in his home thinking that the ATF is going to bust down his door at any moment. I can picture you there in your recliner with your helmet on and with an AR in your lap, waiting for the ATF, to bust through the door or something.
My dog died, so the ATF's going to be disappointed that they can't shoot it when they come up. But I'm just kidding to all the ATF agents who listen.
Yes.
Only joking. Yes. Only joking. No, that actually was a really good answer. I did not know for sure what the answer was to that, but it is something that for years I wanted a suppressor, and I held off a very, very long time because I had guys that had convinced me that the ATF could basically kick down my door at any minute, Christmas morning, and come in there and, rip me out of bed in my pajamas to go look at my suppressor. And it had me scared to death that they told these horrible horror stories that weren't true, but I believed them for a long time. So I was glad to get the answer.
First of all, don't lie to the listeners and say that you sleep in pajamas. I know you wearing tighty whities, but yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And they did clear up a lot for us. I was glad to hear that, it is important and probably smart to carry your paperwork with you. Somebody could pull you over and they could really ruin your hunt for the night if they just want to hold you there until they can prove that you do have a stamp for that suppressor. So carry all that with you. But yeah, that was great information from him, from Jim, and glad he was on the call today.
Yeah, I agree, Hans. So folks, thanks for listening with us. Thanks for sticking with us for 20 episodes. It means a lot to both Hans and I. And, we always want your feedback. We always want you to let us know what you think. We want show topic, suggestions. If you think there's something we need to interview, if there is a question you have, you can always let us know. You can give us a call. We've got a voicemail line set up. It's 903-833-4461. You can also text us pictures to that number. We can't get videos on that number, but we can get pictures. So if you want to send us a picture, and we can post that up on social media and tag you in it if we're able to, I'd be glad to see those pictures. And again, any kind of voicemail you want to leave us, any kind of feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to have it. And, if you ever want to talk to me directly about any kind of night vision or thermal, the best place to start out is outdoorlegacygear.com. But you can also call me, 877-350-1818. And I'm always very happy to answer your questions. And a lot of guys say, man, I just don't know where to start with all this. And I'm glad to walk you through that process and kind of figure out what works best for you. You can also find me on YouTube, searching for Outdoor Legacy Gear. The same thing with Facebook and Instagram. So Hans, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so Jason, everybody can find me on YouTube at Hans ETX. That's Hans ETX. And on Instagram, it's the same thing, Hans ETX. We appreciate y'all listening to this week with the interview with Jim Willi. We look forward to coming back next week with another great show, and we'll talk to y'all soon.